The future is now. Card Ladder is the fastest growing sports card app on the market. The best tools to help you track your cards, watch the trends, stay informed, compare cards, and track the growth of your personal collection. All in one simple and intuitive platform. Join the innovators, not the imitators. The best sports card app on the market. The stock market for sports cards. Card Ladder.
Hey everyone, this is Josh back with Cardboard Chronicles. Today I'm joined by Deniz, the founder of the video game grading company WATA. How are you doing, Deniz?
Hey Josh, good to be here.
So today is a total change up from my channel. I'm gonna do a bit on sealed video games and video game grading. So I thought I'll just bring on the founder of the most prestigious grading company in the space. So why don't you start us off, Deniz? Tell us about yourself and your background in the video game hobby.
Definitely. So I have been collecting since I was a little kid, a little bit of everything. I was exposed to collecting through my dad. So he was primarily a comic book collector, but was also he did a lot of sports cards. He did a lot of mainly basketball cards, a lot of Star, and I was going to comic book shows with him since I was like 4 years old, carrying a long box bigger than me. Um, but that's how I was exposed to collectibles, just in general. I was also collecting Pokemon cards, Crazy Bones. That was the thing, all sorts of stuff when I was a kid. But I grew up with video games. Video games were my escape. I played just a crap load of video games growing up, and when I was like 12, I started actually realizing that there was a collecting market for them. So I started collecting video games because that's what I was passionate about. I remember the first time I collected was I went on Craigslist and there was a lot of like 40 NES cartridges. I didn't even own an NES. I didn't even know really there was something before the Super Nintendo, which is what I grew up with. So I did some education. I bought that lot. They were like $2 a piece. And my dad drove me. I couldn't drive yet. He drove me to a Home Depot parking lot, and I spent like my life savings on these 40 NES cartridges. That's how it started, man. So I joined the preeminent forum, which is now sadly it got bought and shut down, but it was called Nintendo Age, and all old school collectors remember that. And I joined Nintendo Age and sort of made a name for myself because really early on in my collecting career, I bought a different lot off of Craigslist where I got like 100 games for about, again, $2 a piece. And there was a game in there called Stadium Events, which is the rarest licensed NES game. And at the time, it was like a $1,500 game. Um, so I was like ecstatic, and everyone knew me as the kid who found Stadium Events. Over time, I sort of, really got heavily involved. I was buying and selling, doing the flip, going to garage sales. When I was at school, anytime I had time to go on a computer, I would be making deals, setting stuff up for after school. I was bringing kids over from high school, paying them to clean games and bundle systems, and it was like it was that was my income, right? And everything that I made, the thing that was unique was that I didn't have any overhead, right? I wasn't an adult. I didn't have rent. I didn't have to pay for food. um, so it all went right back into video games, and it allowed me to amass a pretty large collection as well. So that was kind of how I became a collector and became active in the space. But it wasn't until I went to college and started going down a path of, business and international business and all this stuff. I speak different languages, minored in Arabic, did all this stuff. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, I know this space. I know there's so much needed in this space. Like, why am I going down this path? And halfway through, I sort of decided I'm going to address the need in the video game space that I didn't see fulfilled that existed in comics, for example, which was what I knew, right? Because I would talk to comic collectors, people who were doing six-figure deals on the regular, seven-figure deals even at these shows, and um, they all love video games, but they didn't ever think about getting into the space, and I was like, why? And it was because there wasn't reliable third-party certification, which every hobby needs. And there wasn't transparency in sales. There wasn't transparency in information. So these barriers had to be knocked down to take video game collecting, which I thought was this big, like kind of big hobby, but it was tiny with this small group of nerdy guys who, we just were geeking out over stuff for 10 years, and everyone was like, yeah, whatever. Um, so that's how WATA was born. I was like, I'm going to knock down the first largest barrier, which is third party reliable certification. And yeah, that was the genesis of it. I could keep going on, about it, but
Yeah,
um,
I'll have follow-up questions about it. Why don't you step back though and maybe talk about like the collecting of video games? Because I think, someone that's just hearing about it, maybe they're thinking like, oh, aren't there like tons of video games? There's like there's specific types of video games that you collect, like sealed. So why don't you get into that, like the
absolutely.
sort of the overview of that side?
Generally, there's three different states of video games, which is sealed, complete in box, and cartridges. And we grade all three states. To be complete in box, you need the manual, the box, and the cartridge at a minimum. um, but there's also like inserts and what we identify, and we'll get into this, game specific inserts, like things that came with that specific game. There are so many variants, so like the first print of a game can vary a lot in value and what's included than the 10th print in some cases. um, but sealed video game collecting is like the acme, the apex of video game collecting, right? It's where the most of the value is. um, but it's starting to trickle over into complete in box now, and there's a lot of casual collectors who don't use grading or certification, and they'll often collect cartridges that sometimes they'll play them, and it's a lot more affordable, right? And it's really cool because there's a lot of different entry points. It's like if you don't want to spend thousands of dollars per game on in the high end sealed level, um, there's a middle ground with complete in box where they might be hundreds of dollars, and then there's cartridges for $10 or $5, right? So it's really cool that it's really dynamic. Um, there's also all the different consoles you can collect for. Obviously, the golden age of video game collecting is the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES, and that's the most valuable games are there. There's the Super Nintendo after that. There's Atari and the 8-bit systems from before that. And it goes all the way through modern. We're having people who are grading Xbox One games, Fortnite's, Minecraft, whatever, right? So it's really dynamic. There's tons of different consoles, tons of different games, libraries, sets, all sorts of different stuff that you can collect.
Yeah, I might as well get it out now, but like I have video games, so like disclosure, I have been collecting some. I just didn't get into this. I didn't want to start talking about this space until I knew more about it and dug in myself, and I thought let's have Dennis on to really round it out. But
To
what is it
that point,
about the Go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, to that point, I think the biggest misconception from video game collectors that have been doing this for 10, 15 years like myself is how few sealed games there are when demand doubles, triples, quadruples, 10x's, right? Um, WATA's existence and knocking down those barriers, our partnership with Heritage, so that Heritage Auctions, so that there's transparency in sales now. Um, all that stuff has accelerated video game collecting, right? So if you look at the collectibles life cycle, video game collecting wasn't really supposed to be where it's at today, and the prices aren't supposed to be where they are for another 5, 7, even 10 years. Um, but we accelerated that gap down to like 2 years, and so now all of that growth is happening really quickly, and the group, the sampling size of how many people are collecting this stuff and collecting it seriously, making investments in it, has grown tremendously. So what we're realizing now is that there isn't enough of these games sealed to go around. It's that simple, right? Like I think it's funny because I've been getting a lot more exposed and having a lot more conversations with people in the card world, and I think it's funny because I think back to when video game collectors like myself, we'd be like, "Oh man, there's so many of those. There's like at least 30 known sealed." And like, you know, um,
30.
Yeah, and like that was like it's like pff, why even bother? Like that's not gonna and you know, not only have we realized the supply is gone now, but we've realized that the drivers of demand are causing people to go after things that weren't necessarily as sought after by video game collectors
Sure.
before, and we can talk about what drives
Yeah.
demand.
So then, yeah, jump into like, I mean, people have probably heard about video game grading and like the whole space. It's probably been exposed to them, but they're just maybe not sure like why would someone collect it. And even myself, like when I first looked at it, it was like this doesn't make a lot of sense. But then you start to remember the games you played, and it's sort of like that same nostalgic hit that you get from that I got from cards, where it's like, dude, I remember playing Mario Kart 64 for hundreds and hundreds of hours. I would love to get that game. You know what I mean? Like, so talk about just maybe like your interactions with people coming into this space and how they like get excited about it when they first join.
Totally, man, and that's you exactly hit it on the head. It's nostalgia, and I'm sure the effect of holding the first graded game in your hand, or even raw, is what brings all of those emotions back. Um, it starts with nostalgia, but what's really significant about video games, as video games have become, the largest sector of multimedia franchise, or not franchise category, I should say, in the world. I mean, it's bigger than music and movies combined, right? It's part of our culture. So, part of American culture, especially. I mean, it's worldwide, but specifically American culture and pop culture. And what I'm realizing is how significant video games are as a pop culture collectible. Like comics were a very pop culture collectible, and they were kind of being not dying, but losing relevance. And then Marvel started coming out with their movies and DC universes and all that stuff, and it revitalized it. And that's why you see comic books. Mainly, it's really the top fraction of a percent are just exploding in a way that was unprecedented. The first appearances of Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, that kind of thing. But video games are the epitome of a pop culture collectible. So what's driving the values in video games is really that new factor, which is relevance to pop culture. I have kind of an equation to determine value, and it has two factors that existed before, which is rarity, right, or scarcity, which exists in pretty much any hobby, and then relevance to video game history, or video game collectors, video game history. But then here's a third factor now, which is relevance to pop culture. And through WATA, as those barriers got knocked down, and video game collecting is now being more easily accessible, people have the confidence to spend thousands of dollars on a graded item. That factor is dominating and dwarfing the value of the other factors, essentially. So a great example that I have is like, um, Mike Tyson's Punch Out was never, you would never talk to a video game collector from 10 years ago, and they would say, or even 5 years ago, Mike Tyson's Punch Out is the epitome of my collection. It's the cornerstone of my collection, a sealed Tyson. They would say it's stadium events, or this obscure game that no one
Yeah.
has heard of, that we know is rare and was significant to video game history, but it wasn't relevant to pop culture. Um, so now we're seeing that went from $1,000 to $10,000 to $30,000, and now depending on the variant, you really can't touch one for less than 25 grand in decent shape. And that was never the case. So, and the same thing's happening across the board for Mario games and Super Smash Bros, or anything really franchise related, Pokemon, right? Things that are relevant to pop culture that you can show anyone on the street and they'll be able to recognize it.
Yeah, we had
Uh,
this in cards, right? Like people who are old school collected PMGs because they're rare and they're historical, and then they collected Jersey Auto cards from the early years. They collected vintage stuff, but then when new people started coming in and it became more popular, it just became like the common rookies of their favorite players, like cards that they can just, oh, that's
the,
like a simple
the
thing for me to
Lucas,
understand. I remember it. I don't have to understand all the intricacies of the hobby. I just know that I buy this, right? So are you? Is that kind of the same?
yeah, like the Lucas and the Giannis's, right?
Sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's really the same thing, and over time, I mean, people are like, that's not to take away from the importance of that relevance to video game history category, right? It's still going to drive demand. But it's like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is another example. It was a $400 game. It was $300, never something, but it's Turtles. So now it's worth a lot of money. And people say, how is that possible? There's so many of them. Well, there still aren't enough for all the people that want it, right? Um, so it's over time, what's also going to happen is as more people come into this hobby, they're going to start caring about those other things because they start to realize as they accumulate stuff how fun it is to get in the weeds and collect this stuff and all the different avenues you can go in. I can't tell you how many people, at first would say there were some guys coming over from Magic, the Gathering, and being like, I literally just want to buy the 3 games that I grew up with. And then like 2 months later, they've dropped 100 grand. Now the same thing's happening, but it's like, hey, I just want to get a few things, and then 2 months later they've dropped 1 million, right? So and that's happening. But over time, it's going to be, it's the lowest common denominator is that popularity are these games, but over time it's just a numbers game, a percentage. I don't know how much, 10%, 20%, whatever it is, of those collectors are going to start caring about the other factors too, right?
Yes.
um, Combined with that third barrier that I was saying right now, the biggest missing piece that's still preventing a lot of people from coming in is information, right? So I said there was no transparency in the grading. That's done. No transparency in the selling through. Like before, if there was a 5-figure sale of a video game, I knew about it, like a group of like 10 of us knew about it. It was all behind closed doors. And so that was also the reason behind the partnership with Heritage. And it's not really a partnership per se, but getting them to get involved in video games was, well, a market can't grow if 5, 10 people know about every significant sale, right? So now it's where almost if there is a significant 5-figure or significant 6-figure sale, it's almost always happening in one of Heritage's signature auction events, right? So those two pieces were taken care of. The third is information. WATA has a responsibility in that, right? Population information primarily. Can't tell you how many people every day ask us when our pop report's coming out. And we have a responsibility in that we want to make the market grow in the right way and to be fun and not to prohibit people from coming in. And I wanted to talk about this. There's a selection bias in what people grade. And so people will send in things that are rarer at first or they want preserved out the gate. So if we don't have the ability, and right now we just don't have the bandwidth to qualify the information that's in a pop report, it can do more harm than good. If we release pop reports as they are and people come in and see that there's 20 of the rare copy of something graded and 0 of the others just because no one wants to grade them and they don't know any better, they're going to think that that's the common version, right? And it's going to affect the way that they spend and invest money in a negative way, and in the long term can really turn people off from playing around in this hobby. So the information needs to come out, but it needs to come out in the right way. Um, Obviously, WATA has a role with the pop information, but there's also other information, just like what variants exist, what makes one variant special over another, right? Um, like, what's the difference between some refractor versus a silver prism versus there's all these different nuances but there's no guides out there. There's no one who went out and said this again. Remember, we're still so early. We wanted to come out with those guides and information, but the growth just happened so quickly. A good example of what we did is there's a black box article we published on our blog, and it laid out, it's actually a good guide to understand sort of the lineage of how variants are created and stuff. But almost overnight, black box, which is the first 40 games that Nintendo released for the NES, basically, right? 30. So it was the launch titles and then the significant.
Yeah.
Mario, Super Mario Bros, right? Duck Hunt, these kind of things. Those overnight, people knew all the variants and what made them specific, and that market kind of exploded because people realized that these sticker seals, if they have a sticker on the seal, that's the test market version that was only available in New York and Los Angeles when Nintendo came out. And so like those games were just became from $50 on eBay, thousands of dollars, right? And dried up. They just got like sucked up, right? So that just exemplifies how much information can affect demand as well. That article, and we just want. I would love for someone to come out with all those different articles or guides or references. We would love to do that. It's just a matter of time right now
Yeah.
and
Okay,
resources.
then why don't you back up and talk about WATA and just kind of walk through sort of like the origins of the company and how the grading process actually works, and maybe try to draw some similarities to like PSA or cards.
Yep. So we had tremendous. So after launching, there was a lot of effort put into the physical product. We partnered out the gate with Canyon Drive Technologies, which is run by Ryan Sabga, who later on in our life cycle, we were at a really critical growth period in 2019, and I asked Ryan to come on board as our CEO, to help us through that and get us to that next level. And he did that, and so Ryan's currently our CEO. But at first, he was just essentially a supplier of these products that are really, we go on podcasts and like groups and stuff, and sometimes together, and people talk about how much the actual look and feel of the product is what kind of sells them once they have
Hmm.
it in hand. And Canyon Drive is responsible for a lot of that. So you see this, the flow it's called, and you see how when I move it around, you can
Yep.
sort of see the hologram. It's not, and the grades are printed on that. It's not, that's not just like some hologram that you can buy off Alibaba. It is literally uses the same patent that was used to make the strip in the $100 euro, which is actually
Mm.
more advanced than what's in the $100 bill in the US. So it's currency thread technology. So it's really state of the art. And then there's also another really integral component is the matrix code, which is on the back of every game. I know it looks like a QR to you, but it's actually way more complicated than a QR. First of all of the data is actually embedded inside this complicated sort of matrix, right? So once we have our scanning app out, which it'll apply to, this is on every game. The app's not released yet, but you'll be able to be in the middle of a desert or in a convention hall where there's no Wi-Fi, and you can scan that and pull up all sorts of information about the game. QRs connect to the internet, right? So
Hmm.
this doesn't use the internet. It's all in that code. Now there's going to be a connect to internet part also, which will provide you things like the pre-grading photos. We take photos of every game that comes into WATA before it's graded. If it's a complete in box game, that's really important because it's all the components laid out. You can have like 20 components, right? All these inserts, manuals, dust covers, whatever. So it gives you an idea of that. And then it'll be able to also ping to pricing information, which will be key. And I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but what's really exciting is the ability to build a peer-to-peer sort of marketplace out of that, right? Allow people to trade using this and manage their collections using the code, to transact through it. And it also can hold enough data. Again, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself now, but it can hold like an entire NES game on that thing. So, people talk about, well, you can't play the game. And we'll get into the whole that should be we should talk about that too, the digital aspect of all of this. But oh, you can't play the game. So why are you putting it in a thing? Well, we can circumvent that through the matrix, right? So it's really a lot of this state of the art stuff that, we didn't put in this to grow the or just to grow the hobby, but to really help all collectors, whether you collect cards, comics, whatever space you're in. We want to have a product that BGS, PSA, CGC, NGC, that their collectors look at this product and they're like, why isn't this stuff in our space, right? We did it primarily. It's primarily for security. This is a system, right? Every game, these it clips together, so it's already tamper evident. Then there are clips inserted, 6 clips inserted into here. So if you break it, you can get into here, but you can't put it back together without because the clips will break the tabs. Um, but even further than that, you can't replicate any other aspect of it, right? It's a system. If you're going to replicate the flow and the grade, you're not going to do it. You're going to be replicating $100 bills, right? You're going to be you're going to be doing something a lot more lucrative than trying to counterfeit video game cases.
Sure.
So we just wanted to make the barrier so high. Um, and again, Canyon Drive and Ryan were integral in that. But outside of that, we also have inside the building talent that just doesn't exist outside of the building. Um, One of our other co-founders is Kenneth Thrower, and he is our chief grader. So he is the one who's applying, applying the standards, the variant information, all that stuff. And
Yep.
no one has the breadth and depth of knowledge that he does when it comes to video games. If there is knowledge outside of our company, it's people who are consultants for us or experts that we work with, right? So we wanted to not just from the product side, but from the actual value of the service, provide the top expertise that exists in the world in this hobby. Um, and so from authentication to grading to the finished product, we have the entire spectrum of know-how, and that's how we offer such a thoroughly good product and service, right? Our biggest downfall is backlogs. So
Yeah.
just,
I mean,
yeah.
that's the same problem for everyone. Um, yeah, the graded cases, I can't speak highly enough of them. Like I've been dealing with PSA and BGS for years. I have a lot of their cards, and they don't even come close to the finished product that WATA is. And I think, like I know that I've talked to you about it, and I know that you put a lot of time into the case, and you're walking through that here. And I think that was just a great move because once you get that product out and those sealed cases are out and people see them, like myself, and I get it in hand, and I'm just like, wow, this thing is like super next level. Your trust factor goes up like 100x. Like now I know I can buy sealed games. I don't have to worry about it. I know that the grading process makes sense, and so kudos on that front. Like the cases are, I'll speak for the collector out there. They're amazing. They're super awesome. The Matrix stuff is exciting. That's the first thing I thought. What you said was like, dude, PSA needs this stuff. They need all of these technologies. Like it needs to get better ASAP because this thing is amazing.
But yeah, again, they didn't have the opportunity. All these other companies have been
Sure.
around for so long that they're just constantly reiterating it, but they can't start from scratch. Whoops. So, um, you know, it was a huge investment. It was a huge investment. But my thinking was, well, and there's been video game grading around for over a decade, but the needle has moved this much, right? There are different companies that provide different things, but the whole thing was people are going to start faking this stuff. The market's going to grow enough, the barriers are going to be knocked down.
Yeah.
People are going to start faking games, and we're rejecting reseals on a daily basis now. But what would you rather invest the time and money in? If you can reseal and fake a game and try to pass it through a grading company, or just remake the case, right? And I've seen across collectible fields that these cases, a lot of the cases are replicable. They can be broken open, they can be put back together, they can be created from scratch. There's no security. You can buy some of the holograms on Alibaba, whatever it is, right? So again, that was the thinking behind there, and we still have so much to roll out now. Josh, you're gonna get a little bit of an exclusive on here because I haven't showed this. We haven't showed this to anyone. We're just messing around with this right now. But a lot of people have been talking about they can't differentiate. So I got two games here. Here's a complete in box Duck Hunt, right? And this is the Mario 3 that I was showing. Or sorry, the Super Mario 64. And we'll talk about the scale, but every sealed game gets a seal rating as well. This A+ here, and if you know to look out for it, you can see that. If it's a complete in box game, it doesn't have that. It lists the variants, and it can get really long. It lists the variants of the box, the cartridge, and the manual, but it doesn't have that seal rating. But some people are saying it's still not overt enough, right? I still can't tell just by looking at it, and it takes really a short time to actually figure it out. But hey, let's make it a little more overt. And this is the first time I'm showing this, but we're messing around with some new colored labels here too.
Nice.
So we've got red, green, and a silver one that we're going down that path too. So again, different things we're going to add to the features and roll out over time to the actual physical product. I don't have a badge. Do you have any badges, Josh, on any of your games? Do you remember the gold badge on the left?
On the side, yeah, I have one.
Okay. The I'll explain it. The deep badge is the third piece of technology that um, Canyon Drive provided us. It's an optic technology, and if you hold it, are you able to hold it really close to the camera, Josh? Yeah, you there you go. You see okay, it's if you hold it even closer than that, it goes and says okay, 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 and it has WATA. Yep, there you go. It has WATA and it has the like a wave like a water wave. Yep. So,
Oh wow.
did you ever see that? I don't know if you knew that, Josh. If you hold it like
Well, no,
literally
because I saw like some of my games have the the grade on the side, and then some of them have that. Yeah, I wasn't sure what that was.
Yeah, it's people can opt in if you get a 9.0 or higher, you can opt in to get the badge for it's an $8 upcharge. And it's just a cool prestigious little thing that also is a piece of security too. So anyways, all these little things that we want to just build pieces of value. But once the scanning capabilities come up, it's gonna just shoot through the roof.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on like the you can't play them. That one never bothered me because video games to me are like the easiest thing to get your hands on and play them. The actual like artwork of the sealed physical game is the part that's hard to find, you know? So like you collect the games sealed, but you play the games digitally on whatever, you got your Raspis, you've got I built a Raspi after I first got into it because I was like, I need to start playing some of these games. That stuff is easy, I don't need to go buy the cartridge necessarily, especially for guys coming in new like me. I know a lot of your, old time collectors like to play the original consoles and they like to have it the physical original game. But for guys like myself, we just want to play the games in the most convenient way possible, and then the collecting is for the sealed boxes.
Well, so let's talk about that a little bit. I love that argument because I've heard they used to say it for everything, right? Comics, especially when comic grading came. Well, you can't read the book anymore. It's like okay, well, there's alternatives, right? There's you can read digital books, you can read a reprint, and then people would still say, well, it's not the same experience, and they're right. You can't, the smell is not the same, whatever. With technology, like the Raspis, or there's something called the EverDrive, which is
Hmm.
my favorite. Um, it's literally the exact same. The experience has more to do with the TV you're using than the thing. So the EverDrive is like they'll have like an N64 cartridge with an SD card slot. So you load the SD card up with ROMs and then you put it in, and so you still get to use it on original hardware. I have one EverDrive with every N64 game on it, and I'm still playing it with an original N64 and an N64 controller, and the experience is the exact same. There's no difference. It's not even emulation. So that argument's completely out the window. But what it does and is it allows us to appreciate the medium more for its artistic and historic value, right? Um, Video game artwork has actually been a big thing now, and people are starting, myself included, to it's really expensive side hobby, collect original artwork for game covers. Um, and the artists are being recognized. There's really famous artists like Greg. I got a piece, Mickey Mania, from Greg Ray. He did the cover to Sonic, the original Sonic the Hedgehog, right? People like Greg Martin did all these. There are these really famous artists that are now getting recognized, and people are appreciating the art, and then they're appreciating the history of having something like a sealed Zelda. The like when it came out. And oh my God, this is a piece of history right here, an unopened copy of the original Zelda. So it's really cool. And then there's also the digital element, right? So a lot of people ask me, or people coming into this say, well, is there going to be enough material because everything's going digital now, right? They're going to eventually stop printing physical games. Um, I think it's a really interesting argument, but I'm like, I welcome it because what's happening, it's the same thing. What digital is doing is it's creating access, right? It's allowing people to play. A great example is the NES and Super Nintendo Classic. Remember when Nintendo came out with the minis like 5 years ago or whatever it was?
Yeah.
There was like a revolution, and all these people, all these 30, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds who hadn't played these games in forever, now had a way to go to Walmart and buy this and relive those experiences. And then what they did is they said, I want to go out and buy the real fucking thing. You know what I mean? They literally started going out and buying, um, collecting games,
Right.
collecting old games. It drove them to actually get. So again, it creates access, and it makes people want to go back and go into the collecting side, and the preservation side. It really is preservation at the end of the day, in a different way. And I think, as we're seeing sealed prices go so high, we're seeing a movement to complete in box. And I think it's going to be, 10 years or less before people are grading cartridges and saying, look at this Smash Bros. 64 9.4 cartridge I got, man. Um, and let me tell you though, I cleaned in my high school days. I was cleaning thousands of cartridges, and now knowing how we grade, I don't think I ever saw like a gold Zelda cartridge. I don't think I ever saw a 9.0 or higher. We grade cartridges so harshly. It is really a feat if you have that gold iconic Zelda cartridge in a 9.0 or higher. So again, there, because of the condition rarity, which was that fourth factor in that equation, um, condition rarity is also going to play a part in value. Having something in a 9.8 or 9.6 that just doesn't exist otherwise, you know.
Yeah. Talk about the grading scale real quick, because it's like
Oh,
per
for
se
sure.
we've got 1 through 10, and it's very simple. That was kind of the one barrier for me, was like, this is 9.0, and you were like, oh, 9.0 is pretty good, but there's like 9.2, 9.4. So I was having trouble understanding kind of like the relative grade from 9 to 10 and below.
Totally. It's probably more like BGS for card guys is a better comparison, but really it's almost identical to the comic grading scale, which is 0 up to 9 is zero point 0.5 increments for the box, right? Or the cartridge or the manual if we're grading manuals. So 0 0.5, 1.0, 1.5, all the way up to 9.0. Then from 9 to 10, it's zero point 0.2 increments. So 9.2, 4, 6, 8. And then technically we do give out 10s, but they're 9.8 is like the equivalent of a PSA 10, right? In terms of like how we give it. A 10 is like getting an 11. I don't know. It's like
Black label.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Quad 10s or something. I don't know. But for CIBs, it's also an equation. So the box is 50% of the grade, and the breakdown will be on the back. So this one says box 9.4, manual 7.0, cart 7.0, overall 8.5. So you get an overall grade based on the subgrades, which is actually really, that's going to be a whole other element, because people are going to be getting these back, trying to upgrade parts, send them back in for grading, and you don't want to mess it up, because if you throw in a manual from the right bros variant of Mario 3 into the left bros box, you're going to get what's called an imp, which is an improperly married part. And it actually goes on the grade. I don't have an example here, but it says imp on here. So like, it's like, oh, imp. And we track all of that too, right? Because we have the expertise to know what came with what. Um, so anyways, the box is 50%, cartridge is 30%, manual is 20%. So it's a pretty basic breakdown. Um, and then for sealed games, the box obviously gets separate things. We're looking at the seal and the box. I keep using this Mario 64, so let me change it up. Oh man, it says my internet connection's unstable. Are
You're
we
good.
good?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
back on.
It says here's a Smash Bros. This is a 9. This is a killer grade, by the way. This is pretty valuable. And none of this stuff is mine. I'm at the office right now, so I'm pulling stuff. It's a 9.4 A++. So that means it's basically a perfect wrap. Now, people might see some stuff on the wrap and say, "How is this an A++?" Because they see a little scuff or something. The
Hmm.
wrap grades go from C, C+, B, B+, A+, and then A++. They're still ranges. So an A++ is basically like a 9.4 to a 10, right? It's like a pretty damn near perfect or case fresh copy, maybe even like a 9.6. And then an A plus is like a 9.0, so again, it's not like they're ranges, they're still ranges, but we're grading two separate things. If you get a B plus, it probably means it's got some holes in it. maybe a small little hole or some corner poking, some pretty significant scuffing. A C is like the wrap is like falling off and this thing is barely sealed. And then we also have an NS, which is a no seal. Some games didn't even come sealed, but and that's another thing people say, how can you tell if it's sealed? Once a game's been open once, we have methods to identify that it's been open, period. So we might give no seals to games that, a lot of times people will send in a game and it'll be resealed, but it was a store reseal, meaning when it was at Best Buy or Toys R Us, the seal got snagged. They pulled the original factory seal off and then they resealed it in-house. So people will say, "How I bought this at the store 20 years ago." It's like, yeah, but it's not original seal. So we to offer them to take it off and then grade it as a no seal because it still isn't open, right? So that's another little kind of gray area there. But that's the and every medium's different. We grade based on the medium. Unfortunately, it's really tough for our graders to train because we're grading cardboard on a CIB cardboard game, paper for the manual, and then plastic for the cartridge with a glossy label. If we're grading a PS1 game, it's a jewel case with a CD. So it's how can we create standards that make sense for the medium that's being graded.
Sure.
A good example is like we're launching TurboGrafx, which is a system where a lot of them are bowed. They're like half pipes almost because they're such thin boxes that the shrink wrap over time sort of collapse them. But that's standard. That's commonplace. So we take that into consideration, and we're not like, well, the highest you can get is a 6.0 because they're all bowed. That would make sense, right? We're grading
Right.
it within that medium. So there's a lot there.
Okay, so now I'll get into the variants because like I almost bought something and then it was like, oh no, that's the variant from that was printed in Mexico. You don't want that. You want the Japanese version. So that was just like my initial exposure. And I was like, what's the difference? And it's like, oh well, it's when they were printed. It matters to collectors. Can you talk about like keep it kind of simple because I know that you could probably talk about that for 2 hours,
Totally.
but maybe break that down just a little bit.
Totally. And go to the black box guide, check it out to see how deep you can get with variants on NES, because that's pretty exhaustive. And then there's minor things like Bart Simpson Space Mutants, matte graining on the back is at the top in the and then later it's in the bottom, things like that. The major variants that you want to be careful for, and I have these examples, was we were talking about Mario 64. Here's the original issue, and then here's the re-release, which is the greatest hits or the player's choice. It's called player's choice for Nintendo, greatest hits for like PS1. PS1, they'll be like green labels instead of black labels, and it'll say greatest hits. This is a player's choice, so it has this seal, and then the box on the back, it's gold, and this one's red. These are way more common now. When this is like $10,000, these have now gone to 1,000 or 2,000. But sometimes you can see huge discrepancies, like Crash Bandicoot, mint first print is now like upwards of $20,000, and then you can go on eBay right now and buy the green label for like $300, right? So it's a huge, and I think that's going to change over time as again, if before people go into complete and box, I think they're going to go into like player's choice
Choice.
and
Yeah.
reissues and things like that.
Because the
Um,
player's choice is like basically infinite printing. We don't know how many, but the original they stopped once they hit a certain point.
Right, and so if someone's gonna find a warehouse find or a case pack of unopened that were unsold stock, it's probably gonna be the later print because, again, and that's why the earlier prints are so desirable because who bought the first print of this game and didn't open and play it? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like Zelda. There's literally one known TM, they call it, TM Legend of Zelda, one known first print, and it's probably at like a $500,000 now. But that's it. So the next best, and even the second print, there's like 10 known sealed copies, right? So it's so tough at that. I mean, those are like some of those the patches that there's like one of one. I mean, you're really talking about museum pieces with some of these early print NES games or black box hang tabs or sticker sealed games and whatnot. But then, yeah, when you get into Super Nintendo, there's made in Japan, made in Mexico. Some games like Chrono Trigger um, only came with made in Mexico. So again, I know this all sounds confusing. Someone coming in, they're like, "Well, I'm going to look for the made in Japan version." Well, it didn't exist for this game, you know. So
Ugh.
made in Mexico is the only, and the made in Mexico boxes are a little flimsier. The manual, like they're different material. Um, again, there needs to be these guides out there, and hopefully over
Sure.
time. But you can still educate yourself. You can still figure it out. You can go online, do research, dig into old forum posts. It's all out there. It's just not consolidated.
The scariest one to me was the Grand Theft Auto trilogy. Because
Oh.
I just saw a bunch of Grand Theft Autos and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get one of these. They're easy to find. I'll just grab one. But every single one of them were from this like re-release trilogy that was like this infinitely printed, sealed, 3 copies of the old GTA games, and there's tons of them, and everyone's like, don't buy the trilogy ones, and it's like, why? What is the difference? Oh, there's millions of them, right?
Yeah, I actually have a customer's one over here. Um, this is the not trilogy version, and you can tell because it has the Sony security strip on the top of the game, right? That's what you want to look for with those. The trilogy ones, and we label it. We say the trilogy on the label, but um, those are those are a lot more common, and there's a lot of unsold stock of those ones on eBay. So yeah, that's a big one. You want to be careful, but again, it's really tough. It's really tough, especially as people are resealing and you're buying raw stuff. Um,
Sure.
we're especially on the modern because it's a little bit easier to reseal a GameCube or a PS2 game. We're rejecting tons, and it's unfortunate
Sure.
because people are getting burned by this.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. I'm gonna ask just kind of what's next for WATA. What are you guys looking at next? And I think I'll probably bring you back for another episode because this is like a whole new thing, and it's really hard to condense it all. But so I do appreciate the time today. So why don't you just wrap it up? What's the future for WATA? What do you guys got going on? Maybe some other tidbit about the hobby that maybe sports cards guys don't know.
Well, yeah. Look, Josh, we can totally have another episode because there's so much more, still so much more to talk about. I think that in general that we're going through in collectibles as a whole, like a real cultural shift. Um, I think that people are realizing the value of collectibles, the value of certification, and are moving toward and are all looking at video games because it's something that you can hold and have on your mantle and bring back those memories, but also have value. I think I mentioned to you at one point the sort of cultural shift away from things, right? Like a kid buying it, getting out of college, buying his own first apartment. He gets a couch, he gets a laptop, he's got his phone, a desk, and then that's it. Like we're not filling our homes with things anymore because it's a move away towards digital, towards a minimalistic, and what it's doing is it's causing this new generation to want things, and they're moving towards collectibles. So I think video games especially have that going for them. Um, Collectible video games. And I think that there's nothing more American than collecting video games. Like it's Americana. It's pop culture. And then specifically, maybe we should end on this for sports guys coming into this that are looking. Everyone's going to want the Mario's. Everyone's going to want the Zeldas, the franchise games, the Mario Karts. But sports games historically were kind of not appreciated by video game collectors again for all those reasons that we talked about. They were the common games that it's just sports games, right? But yet we all played sports games. Man, I can't tell you how many hours I spent on NFL Blitz and Slugfest as a kid.
Yeah.
So you got Matt. I just had this here, Madden 95 for some of the older school guys. There's Ring King. Um, and I think that a lot of sports guys who are coming in are already looking in that area, and you have all the. I mean, every Madden had a different cover, and it's funny. Some games, I'm thinking like NBA Jam '99. I think on N64 had Keith Van Horn on the cover, and it's like guys who didn't turn into really anything, but it's still fun to like think like
Right.
this guy was it's history, right? It's like he was kind of a big thing at that time, so they put him on the cover of the game. You got NBA Jam. That's the one that really blew up because that's the one everyone remembers, right? And in NBA Jam, even again taking it back to the history, I think it's Pippen and BJ Armstrong is the roster for Bulls because Jordan had all these Like it's like, why isn't Jordan in the game, right? Well, because he had all these other licensing agreements that prevent. But then there's Jordan versus Bird. There's other games that have Jordan on it. Michael Jordan, Chaos in the Windy City. So again, and that's like a whole unexplored facet of video game collecting. So that people are starting to get into and explore. But again, where are the lists? Where are the resources to say what sports games are out there?
Sure.
Which ones are significant? Which ones are rare? And there
But
are rare ass sports games.
that's the cool thing about collecting video games, though, to me so far, is that everyone has like their own very specific opinion on what games were the best. And you like I'm sure you get this when you talk to video game guys. It's like, oh, if you didn't play XYZ game, like you were just a loser as a kid, right? And so those guys feel very passionate about those games, and then they're going to want to collect those, and it's going to make new avenues and niches within collecting that like didn't exist before.
Yeah, I mean, and in a way, you can kind of, go into unexplored territory and create demand if you're the one to explore it and put out the resources and share it with people and get other people excited about it. If you think it's exciting, you can get other people excited about it. And people have done that within very specific narrow scopes of video games. Again, I'm not telling all the sports guys, but this, a lot of your audience, a lot of the people
Sure.
listening, you guys collect sports cards. There's so many freaking parallels. Um, and when we do our signature series, that's the future. You said what's coming next. There's opportunities for signing. There's opportunities. We're preserving prototypes in different ways. Um, all sorts of different stuff that we're going to be rolling out. Information. The opportunities are endless, and it's really exciting. Um, I mean, God, I think of how many rookie, the Tom Brady rookie. How many of those are there on the pop? I don't. Are there more of those than there are of NFL Game Day 2003, which is the first Tom Brady cover for video games sealed? I don't know.
Yeah.
There might not be. So how is that not significant? You know, and so anyways, it's just really exciting. It's really exciting. It's really cool. It's really diverse. I think people are going to struggle with trying to get into this and then not knowing where to go and who to ask. There's a really good network of people. I know Josh, you spoke to some guys who helped you out a little bit in video games, but there's like Facebook groups. There's a WATA Facebook group where there's some of the guys on there. It's run by a friend of mine, Josh Byerly. He's like super knowledgeable and has helped a lot of people coming into this with where to go with it, and how to really get started, because I used to do that, but my bandwidth is just so limited. But it's still you can just network and do your own research, and you'll be golden, and you'll be at video game collectors 10 years ago think this is the end. Like to draw the parallel, the first pitch was just thrown, and I keep saying that it's just the beginning. Um, but for people who've been doing this for 15 years and keep seeing prices double, 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 it's like, how can this keep happening? But it's like, you know, I know what the potential is, and I really think it's just started. So
Some dude, appreciate your time. I'm gonna end with a little bit of a tidbit for like sports cards guys coming in new, because I went through it in the last couple of months just like trying to find stuff. I think the best advice is just try to find games that you enjoyed and not necessarily worry about like what's the game I need to go buy in order to have a good collection, because there's just so many games out there. And there's like, for example, I got like NFL Street. I thought that was like the best game ever when I was a kid. It was super cheap. I don't really think many people collect it, but I just enjoyed like reliving playing NFL Street when I was a kid. There's just so much out there that you just got to get in and start like searching eBay, searching Heritage. So Heritage, talk just maybe a little bit about the Heritage thing. Those guys run auctions for games pretty consistently, and that's kind of like the best place to go find games where to buy, right?
I'm glad you said that. They are literally, I think they launched a video game port, because so video games were bundled in with comics, and they still might be, but I think they are launching a video game and Pokemon card specific category.
Yeah,
So it'll be a lot easier to find, and then they have weekly auctions every week. I think they'll be on Mondays. Um, that are there's good quality stuff in there, but then the signature auctions happen every 3 months,
sure.
and those are like cream of the crop, really high end stuff.
Dude, I just searched WATA. It's the best. If you search
Yeah,
WATA, you just get like all kinds of sweet stuff.
yeah. Search WATA. Don't search completed listings because you'll get depressed. Don't go too far back because you'll see what some stuff sold for
That's
2
definitely
years ago.
that was definitely a barrier for me. Was like, dude, this game that I want sold for 300 a couple months ago, and now you're telling me I need to pay 1,000. It's like, well, this is the only copy available. What are you gonna do? And I'm just like, ah,
And it's like, well, do I want to wait and then pay 5,000? Hey, dude, I am the shining example of not buying enough of what I should have back when I could have, and now a Pokemon Red. Like I collected Game Boy. I'm one of the biggest Game Boy collectors in the world, and I just never got a sealed Pokemon Red, even though I had it as a kid. And now people are realizing Pokemon, the whole craze, the cards, everything. It started with the games. It
yeah.
literally started with Pokemon Red and Blue. So and trust me, the pops are nowhere near what what if you go to PSA what the pops there are.
On the card,
They're
yeah.
like they're like this compared to the card. So
Yeah.
and I'm finding myself having to spend a lot more than when I could have bought them for 300-400 bucks.
But
A
it seems
lot
like a
more.
lot of those old time collectors like yourself are sort of just like adjusting to it. I'm sure a lot of guys aren't, and they're just sort of
No, most of them are out, Josh. Most of the guys that were around back then, they sold out, they moved on. There's very few people who saw what prices were back then and kept going and then didn't eventually say this is too much for me. There's still a few, but you'd be
so. Are
surprised.
there a lot of like hurt feelings on the collector investor thing? Because we're going through that with
Oh,
cards big
oh,
time.
oh, oh, totally, dude. The old school collectors, don't say the word investor to them. It's like, ugh, it's an aversion. But hey, like you said, collect what you want, collect what you love, and if it appreciates, like that, there's nothing better because who doesn't want their stuff to appreciate? And you know what? I never understood because like for an old school collector like me, it's like this little hobby that we had and that was like that everyone was like, "Oh, you're weird." It was so insular. It's like, "Okay, well, we have our small community." Now everyone's getting it. Everyone's appreciating it. And it's like all these people are like, "Well, I wanted to be the emo goth table and now everyone likes the music we like and like now it's not cool anymore." It's like, "No, it's freaking it's awesome that we can share this now with everyone, right?" At least that's the way that I look at it. You can look at it either way, but why focus on the negative aspect? Um, use that if you have knowledge, use it to educate people. Like I don't know what else to tell you, or just get out.
Yeah, and the also like I wanted to point out that in cards we have this concept of like pump and dump. Like people buy stuff and they just like talk about it endlessly and then they dump it. It's a little bit different in video games just because I can't just go buy 20 copies of sealed Smash Brothers and then dump it. Like it took me months to find one. So it's a little bit harder. It's like it is more of like a collector journey. Like obviously the games are expensive, but it is more of like you really have to care about a game if you want to find it.
Yeah, and again, that's not to say that you can't start doing that for complete a box games or something like that. But yeah, it's if you're doing it focusing on sealed. I mean, there's a lot of modern sealed stuff where you can pump and dump. Um, but to finish this thought, like fractional groups, the fractional ownership groups like Rally and Otis, they're coming into video games, and it's a really weird concept for video game collectors. But again, it's like if I can make money doing investing in something that I believe in and that I believe has legs and value, and it's something that is nostalgic and reminiscent of something for me, like that's way more fun than investing in a stock an some intangible, immaterial sort of concept. Like, why would I put my money into that? I know about this. I love it. I believe in it. Like so all the hate, it doesn't. It's just look. It's a different way to make money and through and if the vehicle is games, like cool, all the cooler. That's how I look at it at least. But not
Did
everyone
you want
feels
to
the same.
maybe touch on your real quick, just your like your inability to actually sell games because of your role with WATA and like how you buy and sell games? How does that work? Just to make sure people understand.
Well, I don't sell. So and people have said, "Oh, you should be able to sell," but I just don't just because of the, perception of conflict of interest, which I take really seriously. I've never graded a single game I own, and actually, I've got a Instagram page. It's Super NES Man. That's my personal Instagram, and it's where I document all of my collecting. And you'll see there's nothing graded, everything's raw. Um, I'm still a collector. I'll always be a collector. I got under some flack because I bought some stuff and had it shipped, to where I work, which is WATA, and people are like, "Oh, he's grading his own stuff." No, I will never stop collecting, And if people don't like that, then that's I say too bad, but that's what makes our company special. I feel is that we're all collectors. I mentioned Kenneth; he was a coin collector. His background in coins is what gave him the same kind of ability to understand standards and how they should apply to this medium that I had with comics, right? Um, and video games. So we're all collectors here. And that's what makes us able to understand what collectors want in a way that better than just about anyone else, and allows us to have the expertise and knowledge. So some people have a different philosophy, and that's fine. But that's how we do things over here, and I'll never stop collecting, like I said. So.
Well, I said we were going to wrap it up 30 minutes ago, but this is just, it's too interesting. This topic is
Hey
just
man, we
great.
can
So
we can
we're
save
going to
all
need a
the
part
rest of
two.
it for another time.
Yeah. All right, man. Appreciate your time. We'll chat again soon. We'll have to do another one.
Definitely. Thanks, Josh.